All right, we see everybody rolling in. We are just going to wait for those numbers to continue to roll in before we kick this off. Okay, they are still coming in. Let's give it a few more seconds here. All right, let's kick it off. All right, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Hyperspace Challenge webinar series. I'm going to go ahead, and while those members keep rolling in, I'm going to do the least important part of today's program, which is introducing myself. My name is Roger Anderson. I am a former member of the Hyperspace Challenge team, and I stay very involved with the company here. As people in the Space Force do, we take an assignment, we do that, we give it our all, and then we move on to another assignment. So I've moved on to another assignment, but again, stay involved, and very grateful to the Hyperspace Challenge team for inviting me back to host today's webinar. So grateful to be here, grateful to see some old faces that I got used to work with. Little background on me, I'm an engineer for the Space Force. Had the great opportunity a few years ago to work with Hyperspace Challenge, Catalyst Accelerator, and all the other great programming happening at SpaceWorks. After that, I took a little detour in my career and joined a fellowship program where I got to go work with a company called Decode. I've done that for a bit, and most recently, I took a job as the assignments officer for the Space Force Developmental Engineers, where I get to manage the assignments of all of our engineers within the Space Force. So I'm glad to be here today. I won't go into any more of my history because it's, that's the most relevant part for you. But we have some really great panel members here today. We have a great discussion today coming up. A few things to keep in mind as we get ready to kick today off. We invite you to submit questions throughout today's webinar. We want to hear your thoughts, your questions. As you do so, please put those in the Q&A box, not the chat box, but the Q&A box, so we can track those questions, and we'll get to them at the end after we go through some initial questions with our panel members. Also, please keep those Q&A questions on topic for today. So today's webinar is part of an ongoing series hosted by the Hyperspace Challenge, the Air Force Research Lab, and the U.S. Space Force to strengthen the connective tissue between diverse communities within the space industry. And today's event is to explore the future of Hyperspace Challenge, and then to talk about the program's flight heritage, how we got started, and how it continues to shape the industry. So with that, I want to give a big thank you to today's panel members. So with us today, we have Matt Fetro, we have Gabe Mounts, TJ Cook, and Harold Lavender. And we're going to give them a quick minute to give an introduction so we can know who they are. A little quick background about yourself. We'll go in this order. We'll go to Matt, we'll go to Gabe, then TJ, and then Harold to wrap us up. So with that, Matt, can you give us a quick introduction for yourself?
Yeah, super quick. Thanks, Roger, and hello, everyone. I'm Matt Fetter with the Space Rapid Capabilities Office. Space RCO is, of course, one of the 3 acquisition organizations within the U.S. Space Force, and we focus on rapidly delivering first-of-a-kind systems, typically, to the service. And we'll talk more. Over to Gabe.
Hey, everyone. I'm Gabe Mounts. I am the director of the what we call the Tech Engagement Office for the Air Force Research Lab in New Mexico. And just a quick bit about the lab supports both the Air Force and the Space Force now as it stood up. So my job and our office's job is to help do tech transfer stuff out of the lab, meaning technology, expertise, as well as scouting the commercial ecosystem for technology that we might want to adopt or adapt into the Department of the Air Force, Space Force, Air Force. So we'll talk more.
Hey everybody, this is TJ Cook. I am fund manager for a micro VC fund called Ingenuity Venture Fund. And we make seed stage investments in tech startups based in New Mexico. Got involved with Hyperspace Challenge because of heritage we had running accelerators, as you'll hear. But we really love and believe in the potential for New Mexico as an ascendant startup destination, and really happy to be here. Father of three, trail runner, and too often a dad joker, and I apologize for that if I let one fly here in the next hour.
Hi, everybody. I'm Harold Lavender. Again, I'm really happy to be here as well. Really think it's cool that I got included in this August group. My official title is Director of Business and Finance Development at CNN Ingenuity. One of the reasons I'm here is that I was here with Gabe and Matt and TJ at the birth of the Hyperspace Challenge, and I've got a couple of little things to add down the road to that, but I'm looking forward to this discussion.
All right, perfect. And thanks for those introductions. TJ, you mentioned the dad joke. So there is a history with Hyperspace Challenge that we do on occasion tell dad jokes. So let's kick one off for today and get us started on the right foot. I recently came across one that I thought was pretty good. And the question is why did the Soviets lose the space race? And the answer? Because they were Stalin. All right. Let's get into this. Okay. So again, today we're going over really about the history of the Hyperspace Challenge. How do we get started? Where are we going next? And kind of what's coming up, what's on the horizon. So we got some really good, exciting topics to go over today. And let's get started right at the beginning. Let's go all the way back. So we're going to start off with Gabe. I'm going to ask, throw this one over to Gabe. Gabe, can you tell us a little bit about what was the genesis of Hyperspace Challenge and why was there a need to get Hyperspace Challenge started?
Yeah, Roger. So I'm going to go pretty far back to, I think it was around the 2017-18 timeframe. At that time, both Matt Fetrow and myself were leading this outreach operation for the Air Force Research Lab that I just told you about. And during that time was when the Department of the Air Force, now this is before the Space Force stood up, right? The Department of the Air Force in a lot of places was looking at how do they do a better job of connecting to the commercial ecosystem, especially what they would call, and what we still call at times, the non-traditional business ecosystem. Oftentimes that became analogous with small businesses or businesses that had never done work with the government. And there was a lot of different people thinking through that idea about how do we do a better job connecting. And one of the things that came into our world at the time was this idea of using a startup accelerator. We had seen some versions of it where, for those of us that are trying to take our intellectual property, those of us in the federal lab system that are trying to take our intellectual property and get it out into the commercial sector. One idea was to use an accelerator methodology to figure out if we could take, what was the market fit for particular government-based technology that created. So we were experimenting with that. Right about the same time, another young cadre of young military officers, Air Force officers at the time, were conceptualizing, could we also use a startup accelerator model to scout technology and then help those companies that have that capability find kind of what we're calling now a mission fit. So if anybody's familiar with accelerators, right, the whole idea is in the wild, if you find an accelerator, it's all about how do you find a market fit for this product or service that you might be providing as a company. And our thesis, or the thesis of this cadre of individuals, was how could you find a mission fit to our, Department of the Air Force mission set or larger DoD mission set. And so we started experimenting with that model. We had a bunch of other accelerators that we kind of began. The one that we still run is called the Catalyst Accelerator in Colorado Springs. That was more in line with that kind of traditional model. But we started wanting to get after, as that was running in Colorado, what else, is there another thing that we could do that might help us both scout technology, but perhaps be a little bit lighter touch for the companies that might be coming through the program. A lot of accelerators in residence. Some companies don't have a lot of time to take out of their business to kind of be in residence. So we were exploring, could there be another model that's accelerator-like that would enable us to reach out to companies, maybe a larger swath of companies, but maybe also do it in sort of a maybe virtual fashion, for instance. And this is before COVID even, so we were just exploring different models. And ultimately that came to us sitting down with a group at the time called ABQID, a local accelerator company here in Albuquerque, since been acquired, I guess, by the local community college here in Albuquerque called the Community College of New Mexico, and their group that they call Ingenuity, more or less acquired that outfit, where TJ and Harold now sit. We started exploring this idea with them as kind of sort of our local expertise in this space. And as we worked out what a model might look like, we eventually arrived at what we now call this Hyperspace challenge. And that was about, I don't know, it was about 18-ish, 19-ish, something around there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. And so I mean, really saw what was happening in the commercial industry, learned from it. We tried it out, but then Hyperspace, we wanted to take, I guess, more streamlined approach with it sounds like, and do it a little bit differently. And that's great. And I know Harold, you were there at the very beginning, and I know you have a little more insight into kind of how that got kicked off. Can you let us know, kind of from your perspective, being not from the government perspective, but from the ABQID CNM perspective, kind of what you saw? What was your perspective of that story?
Thanks, Roger. Yeah, I think that these are, from my perspective, really exciting stories because of the genesis of this entire project. I think the first thing to add a little bit to how Gabe covered his part. Jake Singleton was the first lieutenant at the time, your predecessor, from the military perspective. And TJ and Jake and I met with Tom Cooley, Dr. Tom Cooley, who was one of the two chief scientists at AFRL. And when we worked with Jake on that, the idea was that we needed to sell this concept to Dr. Cooley, to Tom. And if he bought into it and could carry the message to his higher ups, that we might have a good shot at making this thing happen. So we met with him. We had breakfast at Wex, and we met with him and spent an hour and a half talking to him. And fortunately for us, he bought into the concept. He liked the idea. He really appreciated the fact that there's a huge segment in the public world that had terrific technology development ideas that could really be useful. So that's basically how that was our perspective of how that part started. But what was really interesting was when we met with Matt, and this was a story that was going around at the time. Matt gets fussy if I attribute it to him, but a story that was going around at the time is that, you know what, the Air Force realized that it needed cup holders for a B-52. And the entire system, there wasn't a cup holder for a pilot flying a B-52. And there also wasn't a real easy process to figure out a way to get a cup holder. But guess what? Within the world of development and in the world of technology, there probably would be somebody who could develop or even had a product that would serve that need. And so that, to me, was the idea, the real genesis of the concept. And that is that in the world of technology, we could figure out a way to figure out how to get technology in the hands of the warfighter and Department of Defense quicker. And that was the genesis of the whole program. So that's from my perspective, that's how we started.
If you don't mind, I want to pipe into what Harold's saying real quick, maybe a little bit off script to what we're planning to talk about perhaps. But I also wanted to point out, Roger, that maybe for the audience, I didn't necessarily hear them say, but when this got going as a real sort of program, once it got sold, as Harold said. At the time, a lot of the leadership within AFRL that we were reporting to, me and Matt were reporting to, decided that because of the work we do in this outreach office, this kind of portfolio of accelerators probably best fit with us. And so we kind of formalized the program internally. And the reason I was involved in that is that I became sort of internal, what we call a program manager for this officially funded program that includes the Catalyst Accelerator and you guys at Hyperspace. And Roger, you, as Harold mentioned, Jake Singleton, now Major Jake Singleton with the Space Force, was acting sort of as my deputy running the show. When he left and transferred to his next assignment, you came in, and I just wanted to make sure that we noted that you are a major now in the U.S. Space Force, a military Space Force, a member, in case that wasn't clear at the beginning. Since you've moved on, we have another staff member, a civil servant like myself, who helps us run the accelerators, Dr. Lauren Hunt, who's not with us today, but just wanted to point out sort of the faces and spaces that helped us get this thing off the ground.
Absolutely, Gabe. Thanks for highlighting that. It's early on that there's just so much that we learned by bringing these teams together, interacting with the commercial industry, solving problems like cup holders, right? That seems super simple, but they can get complicated because of the bureaucracy the government is. And so bringing these teams together really made a difference. And we kind of used how to format a way that Hyperspace Challenge arranged itself to best address this and move this along. And that's where I'd like to go next. And TJ, can you explain to us about that format? How did you arrive, and what was the Hyperspace Challenge format?
It's April 2018. Gabe and Matt said, let's do this thing. And I said, awesome, I can't wait to do this. To this day, the most exciting partnership I've been a part of during my tenure here at Ingenuity and the fund and all the work that we're doing. We took 3 months, Roger, to do customer discovery. A little bit of practice what we preach, drink our own champagne, eat our own dog food, that kind of a metaphor. When we talk about preaching lean startup to our companies, and the best way to start is not to go designing the product, but actually to talk to the customers for whom you believe you're going to design a product. So in my shout out lane, I want to shout out to Trisha Terhar. She's now at usertesting.com, which is a cool product. And she's a wonderful lean startup mind, especially on the research side, the customer discovery side. She and I did over, I want to say about 40 interviews over 3 months with government innovators and startup founders. And we asked them simple questions like, how have you interacted with the government in the past? What have you had to do in order to get time with the government? And we asked the government innovators, what have you done to interact with non-traditional companies? We call them startups, but government parlance, the non-traditionals. What has worked, what hasn't? Not rocket science, but this practice of asking some questions that are open-ended. We didn't ask, would you love to participate in a program of our design, and wouldn't it be awesome, right? Those leading questions. We asked, what have you done? What's worked and what's not working? And we took those two streams and we came up with some emergent themes that led to the design. And I'll just summarize those as follows. And with one story, I talked to one founder who said he spent 18 months, expended over $20,000, and it was 7 different places he had to fly to try to answer a question: who should I talk to in the government about my technology, right? Because the government is a world in and of itself, especially the defense community is a world in and of itself. And he still didn't have an answer after 18 months. The navigation part was very difficult for him. On the government innovator side, people who would love to talk to non-traditionals, there are gates up, there are papers that have to go out, postings that have to go out, and we discovered they didn't have time just to sit face to face with a founder of a tech company and have a frank discussion about, what are you doing? Here's the problem I think we have. what's going on here? So the program design was to cut out everything else but getting a tech founder curated around promising technologies that might, not will, but might have something to say about a problem statement that this government innovator is, really focused on solving. So the first Hyperspace Challenge was about geospatial data analytics. In design thinking parlance, we formulated this question: how might we leverage geospatial data technologies to, and I should have this down pat, but that was 5 years ago, so you got to forgive me, to enhance the defense community's efforts on the ground. So it's pretty broad. And underneath that, we curated a bunch of really awesome government innovators who were working on everything from rooftop maintenance to helicopter pilots trying to land in triple canopy brownout situations, everything in between. Really cool set of problem statements, really cool set of tech founders who are looking for that high signal entree into the government. And Roger, the whole purpose of the whole thing was to give each of those founders at least an hour of discussion and open access to the problem sponsors to talk and have a generative discussion. That's it. That was the format. We didn't want to be Techstars or Y Combinator and try to teach these startups lean startup. There are plenty of great accelerators out there. As much as I would have wanted to, right? I could do that all day. Is more of a customer discovery accelerator than anything else for both sides.
That's great. Yeah. And like really, like where is the pain point being experienced, and not and focusing on that specific area. So that's great that you use that human-centered design, customer-centric design method to really narrow down in on where is the problem, and then to address that problem specifically, and to really streamline your efforts, right? So that's great. And with this, the work you were doing, focusing on what the problem is, what you learned from the startups. Can you tell us about a success that you saw come out of using this kind of a format?
The one that I just hope to celebrate again and again, and it has happened again and again, was a company called Crowd AI, still around. Devaki Raj and her really awesome team who contributed and bought in 100% to the process. We were sitting about a mile east of me here in Albuquerque, and in that rainforest building where we held the first year. And that team was able to sit down for an hour with, I think it was Lieutenant Alex Bowe of Civil Engineering with the Air Force. He's responsible for over 1 million square feet of rooftop maintenance. And they had a conversation, and they were able to ask Alex, not like, what cool technology do you want, but how do you do it right now? Teach me how it's working on the ground. Spreadsheets, you use software, really get into the life of Alex Bowe. Long story short, by the end of an hour, they had a concept for how they could pilot Crowd AI's technology, which was already commercially, had commercial traction with insurance and other companies for predictive stuff using aerial imagery and things like that. And they're like, you could prioritize a list of repairs that are probably needed on rooftops using our technology. Coolest thing is that night they went back to their hotel and they actually created a demo that they fit into their 5-minute pitch. Still to this day, one of the best pitches I've ever witnessed. Devaki Raj, pretty awesome entrepreneur. Hat tip to Devaki. And just the hustle, right? That startup culture, and somebody in the government innovation side being able to have that energy with the founder as a team. Like, it felt like we were a team in that room. That's huge. I think if we can do that as a country, we can win over time. So, and longer story short, they were able to get a contract, a phase 2 award, right? This turned into real business for Crowd AI in a way that might have taken them that same 18 months from before, just by this act of simple curation. Get some 2 people, we think there's signal here. Of course, not everybody got the same value from the founder perspective or the government problem sponsor perspective. That comes with the territory of trying to do this innovative work. but that was a really high signal matchup that we were able to make that day.
That's great, and I know there's a lot more examples out there of how this has happened, right? These successes, coming to Hyperspace Challenge, learning something new, engaging with the customer, and then growing from there. And you can't predict how it's going to come out, how it's going to emerge coming out of the programming, but those examples are repeated throughout the history of Hyperspace Challenge, as we've seen. If you don't mind, I have a, as I've thought about this, kind of a, I guess an example of how I see it in my mind, because we have startups and companies building incredible solutions, technological solutions. We have the government who has these needs, but the communication can just be really difficult. A lot of times, just the bureaucracy of the government, like you said earlier, finding that one customer out there, who is the right person to be talking to. It can be very difficult because the government is so large. It seems everybody will point you to somebody else. So the way I see it, I mean, there's this meme on the internet, if you go like search, terrible engineering decisions or something like that, you might see this meme where you have two bridges coming over, a river or something. And as they get close to each other, they're off and they're not lined up. They're just off. This is not connecting. So, and I think that's sometimes where we're at is we have these great solutions. We have these real needs that we have within the government, but the communication is just not lining up like it needs to. And what I've seen with Hyperspace Challenge is having that sit down, having the preparation, go into working with the problem sponsor. So those who are coming forward to explain what their needs are, getting the commercial technology to sit down. We get away from that, where we're split and we get lined up, so that pathway now connects. That's kind of how I've seen it in my mind, that coming out of this program, you can really connect in that matter. We've also seen maybe sometimes where, hey, we learned that what we were thinking the government needed, they're not really interested in. And that's also really valuable information. We've seen it go both ways, but that much clearer picture and understanding of the landscape coming out of sitting down Hyperspace. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Just point that out. What was really surprising to me, because I had a lot of empathy for the entrepreneur, right? I was perhaps most empathetic to the entrepreneur of like, the defense community's got to get its act together, right? But I actually observed some really great value. Back to this crowd AI example, turns out because of our curative efforts, and Gabe was the real great hustler and some Slack channels and some things like that, we got Army civil engineering and Air Force civil engineering in the room together, and they were able to talk for the first time, across the silo because of Hyperspace Challenge around, hey, I bet if we do the solution, you could actually do the same solution and we can, scale, So the good interactions between problem sponsors was this like really surprise interaction. And frankly, it's all very simple. It comes down to the fact that we got everybody out of their offices, got them together. This is just good collision design, right? So turning the question back to you, Roger, do you remember back to that first year, second year when you were involved, that specific story that could like shine the light on that, or what did you observe that was kind of like the aha moment back to what you were saying?
Yeah, it was really, I mean, getting into those meetings, those discussions, new problem sets that maybe the startup wasn't even considering were highlighted there. RS21, I think is another great example of somebody who, had an example, a problem set completely outside of, I think they're working healthcare industry, and they realized that we can apply what we're doing over here into this new, into space. So there's some real greatness that comes out of that, of sitting down. And again, it's the government learning, okay, what technology is out there, and maybe we weren't fully considering this or didn't fully understand what they had to offer. Also the startup or the company themselves learning that they need to pivot a little bit their technology to be relevant to that government customer. But just the fruits that come out of those discussions are tremendous, out of the learning that occurs, the empathy that is built. and so forth. That's what I really saw. And then how Hyperspace does a great job at really focusing on that piece. So, okay. All right. Well, moving on, I want to talk a little bit. I think we got some time to jump over to this for a minute. I think in 2020, I want to say was the first year we started to introduce universities to Hyperspace Challenge. And I know Matt, you were instrumental in helping to make that happen. Matt, I was hoping you could just share a little bit. Why was it so important to you to bring universities in, and how did it change the program?
Thanks, Roger. Yeah, that was a really interesting addition to the program. Universities are part of, almost all sort of technology, workforce development, and business ecosystems in one way or another. And so as the Space Force was standing up, one of their primary goals was to reach out to universities in new and different ways. And that really got us to thinking, how would university involvement really help the companies that are involved in hyperspace, help the government in much the same way that we're learning from the companies, we could learn from the universities. And so the model we've been using that really came forward from universities is a little bit different, but it follows that same model of trying to be lean and very efficient with people's time, looking for what value would universities get out of these conversations with the government, what value would the government get out of those conversations. And it's been a really interesting addition. And one thing I'll point out as well, so oftentimes within the government, at least in the science and technology part of the government, universities are seen as, basic research, and they're great for that. But most universities have, innovation ecosystems, startup ecosystems, right? Workforce development ecosystems, obviously, around their work as well. And all of those have tentacles into various aspects of the Space Force enterprise. And so that's really what became the genesis of the new partnership with universities included in Hyperspace.
That's great. And I saw Dr. Greg Falco jump on there. It was throw out a comment. He was one of our first university teams to come through, and saw a lot of goodness come out of that. That's great.
Roger,
Matt, yes,
Roger,
go ahead.
If I could just jump in real quick. Roxanne Aragon, who was Kathy Steen's predecessor at Hyperspace Challenge, and I were in Logan, Utah at the Small Sats conference. And we had an opportunity to sit, it was a pretty amazing, sit at a table. I think there were 5 colonels from various top aspects of the Air Force, along with Tom Cooley. And we sat around and we're talking, and one of the colonels was very clear that General Raymond, that one of his big pet things was to get the universities more involved. He really wanted to push that. And I think that had a lot to do with our bringing the idea and the concept of bringing universities in. What Matt just said is absolutely the key. And I think that the fact that it was supported so strongly at the highest levels was really important.
All right, thanks for bringing in that piece of history, Harold. Absolutely, yeah, we saw a lot of goodness out. I remember that conference and saw a lot of goodness and interest in the university piece. Matt, if it's okay, let's stick with you for another question. Let's talk a little bit about where we're going this year. So this year we got the Space Rapid Capabilities Office, or Space RCO, as one of the sponsor of the 2023 program. Can you tell about how, I guess, previous successes tied into Space RCO wanting to participate this year? And as along with that, I think it'd be helpful to talk about what the Space Rapid Capability Office is, what the mission there is, because it might be a new term to a lot of the people. So if you can explain, the interest there, I guess, who the Space RCO is, what's the interest there, and what do you hope to accomplish?
Yeah, thanks, Roger. I was trying to unpack a good order to give those in. Well, just I mentioned at the beginning, Space RCO is focused on delivering systems rapidly, right? Usually first of capabilities to the service for rapid needs that we're assigned to do. And so we're working on, over a dozen programs at any one time, and many of them are currently focused on protecting space assets. We'll talk more about that maybe in a minute. And so, of course, we work with industry to get that work done. We're a group of about a couple hundred folks headquartered at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, and we work in offices, right? Industry is developing, and we're working with partners to test those technologies. And so, that relationship with industry, and I mean most of industry now, not just startups, right? But traditional companies that are defense contractors, non-traditional companies, that relationship's super critical. We'll often get assigned a program from senior leaders, and then we need to immediately work with industry and our operator community to understand how to scope that program, how to get to some requirements that are achievable and reasonable in a short period of time. And we also work on the acquisition strategy, right? How are we going to contract for this effort? And we really value those conversations with industry to understand what's going to work for them, what's going to work for the government. We need to do all that very, very quickly. And so now kind of pivoting back to hyperspace, it really follows from the university pivot that we did, or addition we did a few years ago. We got to thinking about how can hyperspace, as really more of a partnership accelerator now in my brain, help the Space RCO, to get our mission needs out to a broader set of industry players. We're always trying to be aware of what's going on in the space industry and adjacent markets and industries, but it's hard, right? There's so much new going on in commercial. There's so many new entrants that we got to thinking that hyperspace could really help us understand how to connect to those companies, again, in a lean and efficient way, both for our folks and for the industry players as well, to try to figure out, is there a value there? And so that's what we're so excited about this year, is reaching out to all sorts of businesses, commercial focusing business, international companies of all sizes, to try to see if they can help us with our space protection mission.
Great. And what I hear there is the aperture, it's opening up, right? It's not just originally we're just really hyper focused on startups, brought in universities, and now we're opening that up, and just, we use the word industry. So
yeah, we need to for our mission. I mean, we're super excited about startups, but we deliver complete systems, right, to the Space Force. And so we need mature technologies or products or services that we can use in innovative ways to fulfill our missions. As we're going through this year's Hyperspace Challenge, we'll be working with AFRLs and the SpaceWorks and DIUs, who are able to support and fund, in some cases, right, less mature technologies. But we're really looking for those more mature products and services that we can figure out how to, again, rapidly, it's in the name, right? It does what it says on the tin, I hope, rapidly field for the force.
That's great. I'm excited to learn more, because more information will be coming out about this year's topic, this year's programming. So stay tuned as Hyperspace pushes out more information about this year's programming. I'm very excited to see what comes of this. That's something else I love to see with Hyperspace Challenge. It's always trying out these new ideas, willing to test something new out, facilitate, build these partnerships. We learn from it, we grow, and we keep trying to also keep that customer in mind and how their experience coming through the program, the company that's working, an industry that's working with Hyperspace Challenge. How is the experience coming out for them, right? We want to build partnerships, we want to build empathy, all that together, right? And Gabe, let's go ahead and kick it back to you for a second on this one. How does this year's 2023 program fit into your vision for Space Force accelerators, including, how does it fit into the research labs, the Air Force research labs, and also SpaceWorks missions and programs? So again, how does the program this year fit into that vision for Space Force accelerators?
Yeah, thanks, Roger. So, like you said earlier, the one thing I'll try to get after sort of what makes hyperspace a little bit different and unique in the way we accelerate connections, as you have heard so far. We typically run one sort of cohort in a year, usually in the fall, but we're not tied necessarily to that same kind of format year per year, or even necessarily running a cohort-based program year per year. And what I'm saying is Hyperspace is one of our programs that enables us to kind of be flexible with how we create the programming in order to both help the DoD at large, do their mission, find technology for their mission, with a specific focus on Space Force, Air Force Research Lab, So we like to kind of customize this thing year per year. And I think over the years, we have seen, as we've participated with a number of the other the DoD innovation groups around the country, all of those other groups are also evolving how they are connecting to industry. So maybe a little history lesson to understand this would be appropriate. When we were creating this program and its sister program, the Catalyst Space Accelerator, kind of underneath this project program that we're calling the Space Force Accelerators, we were doing that right about the same time. In fact, the early founders of AFWorks, one of those early founders of AFWorks was the brain, I call her the brain mother of this concept, Austin DeLorme, who's still with us. She still works for the Air Force as a reservist. But early on, the early team of AFWorks founders were experimenting with how to connect. And we were doing all the space side work, I guess, on this tech scouting operation, which led to these two accelerators. And then ultimately down the road here recently led to us helping, me and some of the work that we do out of the accelerators stand up the SpaceWorks operation. Now, the reason I say that and bring that up, SpaceWorks is the subordinate, space element of AFWorks that now runs mainly that big, large small business innovative research program portfolio, all about helping get contracts to small businesses. Early on, that wasn't set in stone, right? There was experimentation about how to do that work. And we were heavily involved in influencing some concepts for how some of that work came about. So I guess back to the idea about how this fits into the modern program. Early on, we were more concerned about how to find problem sets from within the Air Force Research Lab. We still do that. The Air Force Research Lab itself, in my mind, is also, in a sense, if you think about it, their charter, AFRL's charter, is to do all of the basic science and technology development for the Department of the Air Force. So they're creating a lot of unique, what I would call internal government solutions that often depend on commercial, to then push the envelope for capability that then the services itself, Air Force and Space Force, then field for the mission sets. But if you look at it through a different lens, they're in a sense sort of an intermediary. And they have problem sets that we scout. We try to include in the scouting that we do through these accelerators. But more and more, as all of this innovation and the way we connect to the commercial sector has evolved across the Department of the Air Force, more and more we are looking for how do we help the actual acquisition program offices within Space Force, like the Space RCO, get after some of the unique things they want to get after. I will say that the opportunities to get involved have grown exponentially outside of our accelerator portfolio. For instance, one of the major units within the Space Force called the Space Systems Command has a new front door element that will ostensibly sit right adjacent to SpaceWorks and help do a lot more engagement and provide opportunities for engagement with commercial industry. And so what we're doing in the accelerator program, the way I see it is, we are becoming more of a unique model within that larger umbrella of work to get after specific things that maybe an acquisition office like the Space RCO, maybe a Navy office, or maybe just another element of the Department of the Air Force wants to get after, separate and apart from the larger operation that they're already running, kind of this larger offense that they're running through a number of other avenues. And so the way that Hyperspace in particular is evolving is, as Matt said, how do we now maybe create this next evolution of the accelerator that is accelerating collaboration between the government side and the what I would call the market side, the industry side, to see what better connections can be made that then could be, once those connections are made and partnerships made, can then leverage these other, for instance, contracting mechanisms, perhaps that SpaceWorks has, or that AFWorks has, or the other bona fide, bigger, I'd say bona fide, but the bigger contracts that the Space RCO, for instance, might have. We're now to that stage where we're exploring that and now kind of keeping focus on what are the next big rocks So when I do my scouting inside the fence for government partners going forward, what me and Lauren are up to is, what are the unique things that the government isn't able to access through these other mechanisms that perhaps the Hyperspace Challenge can take care of? And I think that's exactly where we're at with the Space RCO this year.
Can I add one thing from kind of that entrepreneurial perspective? I think what you're hearing from Gabe just now, and I'm looking at some of the questions. I'm looking at the chat. The best question is, okay, I've got X. Where do I go right now to tell the defense community about X to see if it's of use, right? We're all on mission, right? We're all on the same Team USA in the end, and we want to make sure that our leadership is strong through the decades for us, for our children, and for the world. So I think I would just encourage us, keep a spirit of abundance here, keep a spirit of curiosity. When we set out to design Hyperspace Challenge, Matt, Gabe, you remember this conversation, we recognize that there's some contracting norms, vehicles, laws, literal acts of Congress required to change some of the acquisition realities that face people wanting to work with the government. We really wanted to work on the front door. I think what you're describing now, everything else that stood up, yes, there is some more noise that has to be created. Which accelerator do I do, et cetera? But I would say in the spirit of abundance, show up, do your research. Is it Hyperspace's problem statement this year with RCO? Is it Catalyst? Is it something else? Show up and meet people and be curious, and it will get better and better. Like this impetus towards my dream eventually that you are going to be able to type it in once and out it goes, and you hear back 24 hours later that they want you over here for a conversation for an hour, and you have it the next day. Like everybody wants that for our economy, but also our defense community. But it's taking a lot of this work on the front end, and now we're starting to see the back end start to change. But this is multi-year work, and all of you have been patient. I'm speaking to founders and government innovators, frankly. But we're making progress. I think let's keep that in mind. Contracts are coming a little bit more quickly when we make these signal connections and things like that. So just wanted to kind of put that in there.
Yeah, I would love to banter on that real quick too. Because I think I was talking a little bit more conceptually, give you some concrete. When we started, we were experimenting on the government side too with what I call the back end. What happens after the accelerator, right? Remember that? And we, as the innovator team, had to basically really kick and scream inside the fence, as it were, to try to bring to bear some back-end opportunities post-accelerator that would help companies kind of get into the actual, what I call, government pipeline. And that took a long time. And we experimented. And fast forward, we now have a group called SpaceWorks that these accelerators are embedded into. It's not the only way SpaceWorks finds companies, but it is one of the ways. And SpaceWorks owns the Space Force's money for the small business contracts that they run. So we conceptualize an idea of how do we marriage with SBIR, and now we have that marriage with the accelerators being part of the SpaceWorks team. It's not a foregone conclusion that you come to the accelerator, you'll get a SBIR or a sitter, but it is a lot more likely than it was previously before SpaceWorks set up. One of the other issues we faced is how do we get to the acquisition program offices that actually run the real programs, that have the real money to bring you into the mission sets, the capabilities that they're actually developing. And between SpaceWorks and our accelerators, we've been conceptualizing, how do you do that? How do we inside the fence, a lot of tug of war inside the fence to try to bring those bigger operations to bear. And what you see now is the front door operation that Space Systems Command stood up. Still new, they're still learning, but we're starting to see that coalesce of program officers really looking at all of this work that we've done on the innovation side to cultivate companies to bring into their fold. Now, all of that's taken almost 5-6 years, right? It's taken us a long time to get to this point. So all I'm really saying is if you've engaged with us early on and you didn't get anywhere, be patient. We are still building this operation within the larger scheme of the Department of the Air Force, between Air Force Space Force, AFWorks, DIU, all these groups, trying to do a better job of bridging that valley of death. we're not there yet. We're not perfect yet, but there's a lot more successes than there were previously when I started. And it's just continue to build this ship as we go along to make it better. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of deliberate coordination to maximize opportunities we're providing between Hyperspace, between Catalyst, between SSC Front Door and so forth to get those opportunities out to you. Now I do want to jump into a few Q&As here. I have one here that I think has covered it covers several others in the way that are related to this. The question is, so if we have a core technology that is ready for the market and meets multiple core needs for DoD, Space Force, Air Force, how do we get this in front of the correct people right now? And I know that's a common pain point for a lot of people out there. Gabe, TJ, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, to me right now, this is me talking kind of off the cuff here. Your very best way to get it in front of Space Force acquisition folks, the guys that I say acquisition, the folks that actually are trying their hardest to scout tech and understand if anything really in the industry could fit to the programs that they've baselined, is the Space Systems Command front door operation. And in particular, not just their website, right? They have a website. Ostensibly, you can offer up your idea to that website. They'll evaluate it. A lot of times they'll send that to us and the accelerator team as an aside to evaluate. The nugget here for you is on their website, they have been trying their hardest to hold these so-called reverse industry days, these in-person events. My opinion is that those events have been pretty successful. If you can get to them, keep an eye on that calendar where they're holding those in-person events. That is one of the best ways to start meeting those acquisition professionals directly.
All right, so those reverse industry day events, keep your eye out for those, watch out for those. I think SSC, there's a website that's been shared as well that you can find their front door initiative and be able to maybe get some engagement out of there as well. Okay, great. TJ, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, that front door, like, I'm going to go philosophically. In the end, we don't want to need programs, right? We want there to be a marketplace, a one-stop shop. You're seeing that with the front door initiative. There's going to be some trip ups, like saw in some chat, somebody hasn't heard back. That's good feedback, and we should check that down, right? We should at least be responsive. One of the other kind of values of Hyperspace Challenge was being a good customer, being a good customer experience for those who touch Hyperspace Challenge. And kudos to Kathy and the team, Lauren Hunt, for continuing that legacy. It's very important. Other than that, there is a problem. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. There are a number of brands now. There's a number of things, and for Matt and Gabe, we talked about this, especially Gabe now with you being the director here and over these things. Let's cohere and help this new. It's a better noise problem, but it is a noise problem that founders are dealing with in the sense of, can you send me to one place that then tells me which program might be for me or which entity might be the right one, or maybe there's and Gabe, you mentioned it. So this front door is probably the start of that. So, but again, this is work in progress. This is it's a big problem with many entities involved. So to keep the spirit of abundance, but provide that constructive feedback as you're interacting with the defense community and things like that, because that will take you a long way as a founder, being a positive person in that community and helping it progress forward as if we are all on one team, rather than I did or didn't get contract for my company, right? Because customer discovery says you're not there to get a contract. You're actually there to understand whether you should get a contract. And having that curiosity-driven mindset, the old Ted Lasso speech on the dartboard is important.
Roger, if I could object, I think it's really important too to kind of focus back for just 1 second on Hyperspace Challenge. Kathy and her team do a great job of putting out the information about contracts that companies that have come through the cohorts have received. More than 50%. I don't even know what the final number is. I know it's more than 50% of the companies that have come through as cohort members of the Hyperspace Challenge have been able to develop and get a government contract within a reasonable time frame. And I think that's one of the real beauties of the entire program. I see a lot of questions in the chat and a lot of opinions about things like that. So I'm going to put in the plug that if you really want to be involved, really compete to become a part of Hyperspace Challenge, because the odds are pretty strong that you'll have an opportunity to have a contract in a fairly short period of time.
Absolutely. Love that you pulled it back to Hyperspace Challenge there. And you know, the Hyperspace Challenge, but we're in our, is it 5th year now? I want to say 4th or 5th year coming up here. Is that 6? 6. Wow, time flies. Okay, we're in our 6th year now with Hyperspace Challenge, and so Hyperspace has been is one of the front runners, been around the longest in this kind of innovation ecosystem, and some of these other things, other programs are still getting up and going. There's going to be growth that needs to happen as these figures out. But again, like Harold said, Hyperspace Challenge has a great track record, and it's been around for a long time and can provide some really great opportunities for you. So I encourage you to really stay involved. See if the topic, when more information comes out, if it's relevant to you, and compete to participate and get involved. So we're coming up on the end of the hour here for us. I did want to wrap it up with a quick question to the team, and maybe we'll keep it short, maybe 5 words or less for each team member. You keep it to 1 word if you want, but tell us what you predict in space coming up in the next, let's say, 10 years. Where do you think space is heading in the next 10 years? Let's go ahead and we'll work in reverse this time. Harold, then TJ, Matt, Gabe, Matt. We'll go in that order.
Oh, I don't know. I think that it's going to be like Murphy. It's going to be like the law. It's going to be, I can't even go there. It's way beyond my imagination.
All right. Way beyond my imagination. 4 words. Perfect. Okay. All right. Over to TJ.
A decade. That's 2033. There's over 100,000 satellites in LEO. Ticket prices are coming down for suborbital flights, tourists. The mainstream of our society understands the relevance of and fast-growing nature of space. I don't think we're there yet, but I think there's going to be some leading indicators of that. The first space-specific unicorn, the Starlink that breaks out of SpaceX, for example. There are other candidates already, but yeah, from that economic engine perspective, I think we're going to be at and it's been a long time coming, right? But 2033, the adoption curve and the early majority, perhaps late majority of overall awareness of what's happening in space will hit the human consciousness.
Okay. The population understands space. That's what I'm getting out of that. Perfect. Great. All right. Over to Gabe.
Yeah, I think we're going to see, we'll have seen a great start, if not full-fledged operation of a lunar economy and all the underpinning infrastructure that would create that. I think that's right now on the horizon.
Lunar economy up and coming. All right. And Matt.
I've had the longest to think about it. I think we're going to see, I'm probably the most wrong, but I think we're going to see totally surprising and unexpected innovations in space that lead to amazing and economic and social benefits. I've been surprised what's happened in the last 15, 20 years. I think we're going to be really surprised in the future. Maybe the rest of the audience won't be surprised because you guys are in that space, but I can't wait to see what happens.
All right. All right. Well, thank you all. Thanks to our panel members for joining us today. It's been a wonderful discussion about the history of Hyperspace Challenge, what it's done, and where we're going. Stay tuned as information comes out about this year's programming and future years programming. And also encourage you to also pay attention to our future webinar series. We will have more of these. So stay tuned, stay in touch, stay engaged. And again, big thanks to our panel members and thanks for everybody for joining today.
Thanks, Roger.